Imagine a world where every smile is genuine, every gesture sincere, and every act of kindness a deliberate choice rather than an obligation. This is not a call to abandon compassion or retreat into cynicism, but an invitation to reconsider what it means to be truly kind. For generations, we've been taught that kindness is an unqualified virtue, a moral imperative that requires us to extend ourselves endlessly, to prioritize others at the expense of our own well-being, and to equate self-sacrifice with nobility. But what if this universal mandate to be kind to everyone always is not only unsustainable, but fundamentally flawed? What if the pressure to perform kindness as a reflex rather than a conscious act is eroding our capacity for authenticity, depleting our emotional reserves, and even undermining the very connections we seek to nurture? Let's begin by acknowledging the paradox at the heart of this idea. Kindness, in its purest form, is a beautiful and necessary force. It binds communities, heals wounds, and reminds us of our shared humanity. But when kindness becomes a performance, a script we follow out of fear, guilt, or social expectation, it loses its power. It becomes transactional, hollow, and often disingenuous. Think of the coworker who agrees to take on extra projects despite being overwhelmed, the friend who laughs at a hurtful joke to avoid conflict, or the parent who suppresses their exhaustion to meet every demand of their children. These acts, though framed as kindness, are often rooted in avoidance, a fear of disappointing others, a terror of being perceived as selfish, or a subconscious belief that our worth is tied to how much we can endure for the sake of others. This is not kindness. It is self-abandonment. And it comes at a cost. When we stretch ourselves too thin, we risk resentment, a quiet, corrosive emotion that festers when our generosity is unreciprocated or unappreciated. Resentment poisons relationships, not because others are inherently ungrateful, but because we've failed to set boundaries that honor our own limits. Consider the caregiver who burns out after years of tending to a loved one without respite, or the people pleaser who realizes too late that their constant accommodation has left them feeling invisible. These are not stories of virtue. They are cautionary tales about the danger of conflating self-neglect with moral goodness. Boundaries, then, are not the enemy of kindness. They are its necessary companion. To say no when we mean it, to step back when we're depleted, or to decline a request that conflicts with our values is not unkind. It is an act of respect for ourselves and for others. Imagine a world where people gave only what they could genuinely offer, without resentment or hidden agendas. Relationships would deepen because they'd be built on honesty rather than obligation. Trust would flourish because our yes would carry weight, our presence would be intentional, and our kindness would no longer be diluted by exhaustion. But boundaries alone are not enough. We must also confront the cultural myth that kindness requires us to be universally liked. The desire to be perceived as kind can morph into a desperate need for approval, pushing us to silence our opinions, mute our authenticity, and contort ourselves into whatever shape others find most palatable. This is not kindness, it is self-erasure. True kindness does not demand that we agree with everyone, placate every discomfort, or suppress our truth to keep the peace. It asks us to engage with others from a place of integrity, even when it's uncomfortable. Consider the difference between a person who nods along to a harmful comment to avoid conflict and one who speaks up respectfully but firmly. The former might be labeled kind in the moment, but their silence perpetuates harm. The latter, though risking disapproval, models a deeper form of kindness. The courage to challenge, to disrupt, and to hold space for growth. This is the kindness that changes minds, heals divisions, and fosters real connection. It requires us to be brave, not just nice. There is also a societal dimension to this issue. We live in a world that often weaponizes kindness, particularly against marginalized groups. Women, for example, are socialized to be endlessly accommodating, to shrink their ambitions, and to prioritize others' comfort over their own needs. The same pressure is amplified for people of color, LGBTQ+ individuals, and others who are expected to perform emotional labor to soothe the discomfort of those in power. Demanding that these groups be kind in the face of oppression is not just unfair, it is a tool of control. Real kindness cannot coexist with injustice. It requires us to dismantle systems that demand performative niceness from the marginalized while allowing the privileged to remain unchallenged. This brings us to the heart of the matter. Kindness must be intentional, not automatic. It should stem from a place of abundance, not depletion. When we treat kindness as a default setting, something we owe everyone, regardless of context, we risk becoming detached from our own values. We end up giving mechanically, without discernment, and in ways that may inadvertently cause harm. For instance, giving money to someone in need can be compassionate, but if it's done without considering the broader circumstances, such as enabling dependency or ignoring systemic issues, it might not be the most ethical choice. Kindness without wisdom can be short-sighted. Discernment is key. It asks us to pause and ask, why am I doing this? Is this act rooted in genuine care, or is it driven by guilt, fear, or a desire for validation? Am I helping in a way that respects the other person's autonomy, or am I imposing my own agenda? Does this action align with my values, or am I betraying myself to fit someone else's expectation? These questions are uncomfortable, but they guard against the kind of superficial kindness that prioritizes appearances over impact. Moreover, kindness should not be confused with passivity. There is a pervasive belief that to be kind is to be soft, to avoid confrontation, and to endure mistreatment with a smile. This is a dangerous misconception. True kindness can be fierce. It can look like holding someone accountable for their actions, walking away from a toxic relationship, or advocating fiercely for justice. The kindest thing we can do for someone is sometimes to refuse to enable their harmful behavior, not out of punishment, but out of a belief in their capacity to grow. Likewise, the kindest thing we can do for ourselves is to walk away from situations that diminish our dignity, even if it means disappointing others. It's also worth examining the role of self-kindness in this equation. How can we authentically extend care to others if we're pouring from an empty cup? Self-kindness is often dismissed as selfishness, but it is the foundation of sustainable compassion. When we neglect our needs, whether physical, emotional, or spiritual, we become incapable of showing up fully for anyone else. Imagine a gardener who never waters their own plants, but spends hours tending to everyone else's garden. Eventually, their neglect will catch up to them, and they'll have nothing left to give. Self-kindness is not indulgence, it is stewardship. It allows us to replenish our reserves so that our generosity can be rooted in vitality, not martyrdom. This is not to say that kindness should always feel easy or convenient. There will be times when it demands sacrifice, when it pushes us beyond our comfort zones, when it requires us to act in ways that don't immediately benefit us. But there's a difference between intentional sacrifice and chronic self-effacement. The former is a conscious choice aligned with our values. The latter is a pattern of self-betrayal that leaves us feeling hollow. Let's also challenge the assumption that kindness must be directed equally to everyone. Human beings are not wired to love universally. We have finite emotional energy, and it's natural, even healthy, to prioritize those closest to us. Family, friends, communities that share our values. This doesn't mean we should be cruel to strangers or indifferent to suffering, but it does mean recognizing that spreading ourselves too thinly can dilute the quality of our care. Depth over breadth is not a moral failing, it's a recognition of our humanity. Think of kindness as a resource. If we scatter it in every direction without thought, we end up with little left for the people and causes that matter most. But when we allocate it mindfully, investing in relationships that reciprocate, causes that align with our purpose, and moments where our intervention can make a real difference, we create a ripple effect that's far more powerful. This isn't about being selective out of spite. It's about being strategic out of care. Of course, this perspective invites criticism. Some might argue that ceasing to be kind to everyone is a step toward moral relativism, that it opens the door to selfishness and apathy. But this argument misunderstands the premise. The goal isn't to abandon kindness, it's to redefine it. It's to move away from knee-jerk people-pleasing and toward a more conscious, empowered form of compassion, one that recognizes the complexity of human interactions and honors both the giver and the receiver. Critics might also say that setting boundaries or refusing to perform kindness will lead to conflict. And they're right, it often does. But conflict is not inherently negative. It's a natural part of human relationships, and when handled with integrity, it can lead to deeper understanding and growth. Avoiding conflict at all costs is a form of cowardice, not kindness. It prioritizes short-term comfort over long-term truth. So how do we put this into practice? Start by getting curious about your motivations. The next time you feel compelled to say yes when you want to say no, pause. Ask yourself, am I doing this because I genuinely want to help or because I'm afraid of being judged? Practice small acts of boundary setting. Decline an invitation without over-explaining. Express a dissenting opinion politely but firmly. Notice how it feels to prioritize your authenticity over others' expectations. Additionally, reflect on where your kindness is most needed and where it's being wasted. Invest in relationships that are reciprocal, where your care is valued and respected. Redirect energy from one-sided interactions into causes that ignite your passion. And remember that kindness isn't just about what you do for others, it's also about how you show up in the world, living in alignment with your values, whether through ethical consumption, environmental stewardship, or civic engagement, is a profound act of kindness to both humanity and future generations. Finally, embrace the messiness of this journey. Unlearning lifelong habits of overgiving and people-pleasing is not easy. There will be moments of guilt, pushback from those accustomed to your compliance, and a steep learning curve as you navigate this new terrain. But with time, the rewards will emerge. Stronger relationships, a clearer sense of self, and the quiet confidence that comes from knowing your kindness is no longer a performance. It's an expression of who you truly are. In the end, this is not a rejection of kindness, but a reclamation of it. It's a call to stop scattering our energy in the name of being universally likable and start channeling it into purposeful, impactful acts of care. It's an acknowledgement that we are not infinite, that our worth is not tied to how much we endure, and that true kindness requires us to show up for others and for ourselves. With eyes wide open, hearts fully engaged, and a steadfast commitment to what is real over what is easy, let us dare to be kind in the ways that matter, not just in the ways that are expected. Let us replace exhaustion with intention, resentment with clarity. The world doesn't need more people who are nice out of obligation. It needs more people who are brave enough to be kind out of choice.